You could ask a lot of questions here. Dan Hooker makes his return back to the lightweight division against another stud, another dude who is on the up and coming right here, Claudio Puelles right here. This dude snatches knee bars, man, over and over and over again. He snatches your knee. He pulls guard. He has very interesting takedown entries that he's been getting a lot of criticism by, especially the good old DC, Daniel Cormier, who is, I mean, if you're going to get criticized by somebody in regards to wrestling, I mean, you shouldn't feel bad if it's DC. Like, that's the guy, right? That's like being like, oh, Dan Gable told me that I need to shoot better. And it's like, yeah, that's fucking Dan Gable, competitor supreme, absolutely. But either way, Dan Hooker, kickboxer. City Kickboxing right here. What is it? City Kickbox. Yeah, CKB. There we go. Versus the Claudio Puelles of the world, who is, I want to say he's repping Peru. I'm not really sure, to be completely honest with you. But at the end of the day, he's a southpaw. He's got nasty grappling. Stand up, much to be desired. But he can make this fight very interesting. I don't like that Dan Hooker went down to featherweight, even though at lightweight he's a fucking massive 155er, even more massive 145er. And now when you're fighting Claudio Puelles, the game plan has to be avoid the ground at all costs. The ground is lava unless you can get like on top of him for a split second and then get back up to your feet. Because I think if he tries to wrestle Puelles, you're setting up your demise and your downfall. Puelles is a perfect man who says, not a perfect man, but his whole entire game plan is, oh, you want to come over here? All right, we're setting up some butterflies. I'm going to sweep you. I'm going to put myself in a position where I can invert, grab your leg, and it's over. What do you think, man? I mean, a lot of people are putting a lot of bank on Puelles here, a lot more than I thought, because this is another similar situation. Dan Hooker has fought the guys. Puelles hasn't. So what do you think?
Yeah, Dan Hooker has fought the guys, man. I mean, and Dan Hooker, he's a company man. He's caught a little bit of heat for it. Taking a couple fights where I feel like he shouldn't have, and it's kind of derailed his career. He's had the whole weight shift you're talking about. But if you go and look at it, like there's from top to bottom, you want to talk about another fighter who has fought the who's who. This dude has fought in everybody and won some, lost some. So he's one of those not a 50-50 fighter, but getting to that point, and I think this is going to be a good fight for Dan Hooker to really come back and solidify himself as a fighter who he really is. That being said, though, Puelles snatches knees left and right, and Dan Hooker has long, lanky limbs, and I wouldn't say he's the best wrestler or best avoidance of grappling ever. You know what I'm saying? Like there's instances in which Dan Hooker can be put on the back foot and tends to just kind of get lost in the going backwards and not necessarily get out of the way and set up a strike. Now, that being said, this dude, like you said, Derek, fights out of City Kickboxing. So he is going to be prepped. He's going to be, obviously Eugene Berriman, everybody out there has the skill set and the training to be able to get him to perform that way. But when Dan Hooker has been performing, at least as of late, he's been falling a little bit short. Now, that being said, that's against the top of the top. Literally the cream of the crop. The only fights he's lost in his last four, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Islam Makhachev, and the new Arnold Allen. And one of the younger fighters that fight's going to age very, very well in time. But his latest win, Nasrat Haqparast, I wouldn't say a cream of the crop fighter, but somebody who Dan Hooker can perform against and is a really, really good striker, has good ground game. Now he gets to test himself up against another up-and-comer who has the kind of the opposite. Do you think we're going to see kind of a similar fight style where Dan Hooker's controlling the entire fight like he did against Nasrat? Or are we going to see a washing machine style fight right here, Derek? We're going to see a little bit of ground game out of the Hooker camp? What do you think?
No. Not at all. Ground is lava. Stay away from the ground. Control the fight the same way they did against Nasrat. It was an expert game plan, man. When I saw that, I was like, wow, I'm so dumb because I picked for Nasrat Haqparast in that fight. It was such a weird fight, man. That was like you have to do burpees on the plane to cut weight because it was last minute. It was a weird fight. So it's like you can almost throw it out. But at the end of the day, I think Dan Hooker has all the tools on the feet to win this fight. The only question is, can Puelles get the takedown? He made it look easy when he fought Chris Grutzmacher, right? He just got easy takedowns. He kind of does this thing, man, where he drops to his knees, grabs onto your leg and kind of crawls forward. And if you know and I'm not trying to be disrespectful whatsoever, even as a jiu-jitsu guy, like even if you're pure jiu-jitsu, it's like, come on, man, y'all got to work your wrestling a little bit more in your jiu-jitsu. At the end of the day, what is jiu-jitsu? It's judo. It's just judo with some other shit mixed into it, right? So it's like, let's have these deep shots onto the single. and then start penetrating. Dan Hooker, I just think that he's going to be able to stuff a couple of those shots if they're weak like that. And I think that on the feet, like I said, I think he's far too skillful. That teep kick is nasty. I think he's going to be able to keep Puelles at range because Dan Hooker is 2 inches taller. I think he's got like a 3-inch reach advantage, and he's big. He's just a massive individual, right? Puelles is a tall guy too, but I mean, Hooker is thick, right? So I think that's the game plan. I think this is a pretty cut and dry fight. I just think that if you're a Claudio Puelles, you said it yourself, but I want to list off a couple of the names. Your biggest win to date, Clay Guida. That's your biggest win to date if you're Claudio Puelles. And if you're Dan Hooker, I mean, you have to argue, bro. Yeah, you have a lot of losses to the Arnold Allens, the Makashevs, the, Chandlers, Poiriers, right? But you have wins over Paul Felder, over Al Iaquinta, over Gilbert Burns, Jim Miller, Mark Jacasey, D1 Mark Jacasey, right? You got some good wins, man. And you fought pretty much the best of the best. So I like Dan Hooker here. I get it. A lot of people are mentioning this. He could be the new Cowboy Cerrone, the way that he's fighting. I don't think that we're going to fall into that territory. You're right. Sometimes being a company man costs you. But I like Dan Hooker, and I like him to edge out a very interesting, gritty decision here against a Claudio Puelles, plus 155. But if I'm being honest, folks, that minus 165, I think that would probably be the safest bet right here if you're a Dan Hooker, because we don't know. He's coming off a lot of losses. We don't know. I didn't really like his vibe at the press conference, to be honest with you. He felt a little too relaxed, a little too, But hopefully we see some good stuff. How do you see it?
Yeah, Derek, I'm actually going the opposite, man. I'm going Puelles right here, and I'm going submission. I'm taking that plus 400. I think knees are getting snatched, and I hope it's not too bad for Dan Hooker, man. I hope it's not too bad for the Hangman. But good thing is, man, the UFC has prime healthcare. I'm going Claudio Puelles, submission, round 2.
Are we going for round 2?
Early round 2.
All right, so you're taking the under. The over and under is 2.5 rounds here, so you'd have to go late round 3 if you want the over. All right, man. Well, that's a hell of a fight to kick off the card, and this is just a pretty stacked card, man. So I don't want to miss.